Hello, my name is Debbie Kay with the League of Women Voters of Portland, and you're watching Video Voters Guide. We are at the studios of MetroEast Community Media to interview candidates running in the May primary election for the state of Oregon. Thank you for joining us, and thank you, Shemia Fagan, for joining us, running for State Senate District 24. Please tell us a little about yourself and why you're running for office.
Thank you, Debbie. So there's a record number of women who are running for office this year resisting Trump, and I'm one of those women. And I am a former state representative, and I'm also a civil rights attorney. I fight racism and sexism against Oregon workers. But I started my legal career 10 years ago as a pro bono attorney fighting wrongful evictions in Oregon. So housing security is the focus of my campaign and has been one of the focuses of my career, but also one of the focuses of my life. Debbie, my mom was homeless for much of my childhood right here in East County. In fact, right in East Portland in the parameters of this district. And I remember one time I went to visit my mom. It was about 1997, and I was 15. And my brother was taking us, and at that point my dad was a single parent, and my brother pulled up to this big house. It was kind of a Victorian style house in East Portland with a huge wraparound porch. And we were thinking, wow, Mom, nice house. And she greeted us and then walked us around to the front steps. But instead of walking up the steps, she dropped to her hands and knees and she crawled under the porch. And then she invited us into her home. And my brother and I dropped to our hands and knees and we crawled under the porch behind her and we spent the day with her. And my mom, like most people who experience homelessness, didn't drive around with a U-Haul. She had one box that she kept with her that was full of pictures and letters from us. And I hold that with me because I think that too often politicians can approach some of Oregon's greatest challenges as empty statistics, but not me, because I understand that every person that's out there that's struggling is somebody's somebody. Somebody's brother, or maybe somebody's friend, or grandpa, or somebody's mom. And so I'm running for the Oregon State Senate because I want all of those somebodies to know that there's going to be somebody in Salem that's fighting for them.
Thank you. What steps will you take to ensure that more Oregonians are qualified and hired in Oregon jobs?
Oh, Debbie, the key is strong Oregon schools. I am a kid that didn't have much of a chance without Oregon's public schools, and I believe that they are the foundation of our business community, even in Oregon, to have strong public schools. As I mentioned, my mom was homeless, and so I was one of those kids that didn't have much of a shot without schools. And I remember, in particular, in fourth grade, I had a teacher who really took a keen interest in me. He saw potential in me, and despite the fact that I acted out a lot because I was one of those kids that came from a rough home, he invested in me, and he actually invited me to join kind of an after-school chess club. And I was like, all right, I'll join this chess club. And by the end of that year, I was living in Dufur, Oregon at the time, out in Eastern Oregon. And I traveled from tiny little Dufur to Portland, and I won the Oregon State Chess Tournament. And I'll never forget how that felt, that I was, I knew for the first time that it doesn't matter that I don't have everything that other kids have. I can compete with anyone. And I think that's the foundation for all of our job training, is to make sure that our schools are strong, that our public schools are taking kids like me that maybe don't have most of the resources at home or don't always have two parents at home, but they're able to have teachers who believe in them, and those teachers have the resources to invest in those kids, and those kids can go on to do what I did, which is to work my way through college and law school and to kind of pursue my dreams. And so I'm a mom. I've got two little kids. My son starts kindergarten this fall in Oregon public schools, and I'm committed to making our schools strong enough so that businesses that are grown here or that want to locate here know that we have a ready workforce for them coming out of Oregon's public schools.
All right. Oregon traditionally has a budget shortfall. How will you address this challenge?
Well, first off, corporations pay one of the lowest tax rates in the country here in Oregon. And yet Oregonians are generous people. So what I hear all over the community when I'm knocking doors for this campaign is people who are on a fixed income, often seniors, saying, look, I want to be generous. I want to support Oregon schools. I want to support vulnerable families. But I'm getting to the point where if property taxes keep going up, I might lose my house. And I think there's a real tension between having the lowest corporate tax rate in the country and yet having generous Oregonians who want to support schools, who want to support people around us that are vulnerable. And so I believe that first and foremost, we have to make corporations pay their fair share in Oregon. And I know there's a lot of talk about raising the corporate tax rate. And that was tried at Measure 97, and Oregonians turned that down. But there's also a way that we can, as legislators, reduce tax giveaways and tax breaks for corporations if they're only benefiting corporations or the wealthiest Oregonians. I think we need to take a hard look at those and audit those to make sure that all the tax breaks that are offered in Oregon are really going to help vulnerable families and middle income families and not going to benefit large corporations and the wealthiest among us. When we find those tax breaks, I think we need to rein those in and invest those dollars in our schools and public services.
Thank you. What do you recommend to make Oregon's infrastructure and population more resilient to seismic, flood, and wildlife disasters?
Well, first of all, I believe that climate change is real. And I think in Oregon, we're seeing increases in wildfires and flood warnings because of climate change in our area. And so I'm endorsed in this campaign by the Sierra Club, for example, because they know that I'll be a champion to combat climate change. But I'm so glad you mentioned seismic, because people don't often think of that when we think of resiliency. And the Cascadia subduction zone earthquake is overdue in our area and is going to be a devastating earthquake in this area. And so there's things that families can do. OPB, Oregon Public Broadcasting, has a great documentary called Unprepared about the things that families can do. We have a garage in my house full of bottled water, and we're continuing to update that. But I think as a state official, the number one priority has to be seismically upgrading our schools. Because when the big one hits, not if, but when, we need to make sure that our kids are safe. And as a mom, I want to know that my son and my daughter are going to go to a school that's going to hold fast and be safe for them when that Cascadia subduction zone earthquake happens.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What are your other priorities?
Well, as I mentioned before, housing is my top priority in this race. I believe that the key to addressing our housing crisis and our homeless crisis is to make sure that people who are currently housed stay housed. And I believe that that means, number one, making sure that renters are protected, that renters aren't facing what are called no-cause evictions, being kicked out of their homes for literally no reason. Their landlords can just give them a no cause, or a rent increase that's exorbitant. I think we need to protect renters from that. And then I also think that we need to make sure that homeownership is affordable for more Oregonians. And those are the two priorities that I'm really committed to addressing our housing crisis here in Oregon.
Anything further? You've still got some time.
Well, first of all, I think that the key is this district has a lot of vulnerable families, and I think that we deserve a fighter in this community. And when I was in the legislature before, I was known for somebody that was willing to stand up for my community and stand up for my values, even when it didn't make kind of the professional lobbyist class very happy. And the Willamette Week, the kind of weekly newspaper that comes out in Portland, puts out this issue every other year where lobbyists are allowed to kind of dish on legislators and say nasty things about them anonymously. And a lobbyist once told the Willamette Week about me, quote, "It wouldn't surprise me if Shemia's a cage fighter on the side." Now, the lobbyist didn't mean it as a compliment, but I'm going to take it as one, because when it comes to the difference between kind of go along, get along with the professional lobbyist class and fighting for our families in a cage match, I will take up that fight for our progressive values and our families every single time.
All right. You've got about 30 seconds. Anything else you want to add?
Well, my name is Shemia Fagan, and I am counting on the voters of East Portland and North Clackamas to vote for me in the Democratic primary for Oregon State Senate District 24.
Thank you very much. This is the Video Voters Guide. Thank you for watching. The primary election is Tuesday, May 15th. Ballots are due by 8 o'clock that evening. Please be sure to inform yourselves about the candidates and about ballot measures. Your vote counts. Thank you.